At 10 p.m., my phone lit up with a notification. My next-door neighbor had tagged me in the apartment's Facebook group, accusing me of making noise all night. She claimed my bed was squeaking and keeping everyone awake. She said her baby had a heart condition, and if I woke him again, she would make me regret it. Her message was laced with hostility, as if she had been waiting for an excuse to lash out. I replied calmly, explaining that I lived alone and had been in bed reading. She dismissed it immediately, insisting I was lying and trying to cause trouble for her and her child. Other neighbors chimed in, telling me to be more considerate. In my previous life, this was the beginning of everything. I didn't know then how far her accusations would go. I thought she was simply stressed or overwhelmed. I tried to reason with her. I tried to keep the peace. But over time, her accusations escalated. She said I was banging on the walls. She said I was stomping around. She said I intentionally made noise to hurt her child. No amount of explanation helped. Neighbors began to sympathize with her. I felt increasingly isolated, trapped in a nightmare I didn't understand. 2 weeks later, everything ended. I returned from a friend's house, where I had been staying to escape the tension. As soon as I entered my apartment, she burst in behind me. She had a kitchen knife in her hand. She screamed that her baby had died and that it was my fault. Her words made no sense. I had never even seen her child. Before I could react, she attacked me. I felt burning pain with each strike, my body weakening, my vision blurring. As I lay on the floor, bleeding out, I kept thinking, how could I have hurt a baby I never saw? Her voice was the last thing I heard, filled with hatred and grief. Then, as if tearing through darkness, I opened my eyes. I was alive again. I was back on the day she had first accused me in the group chat. This time, fear didn't cloud my mind. Anger and clarity did. Instead of apologizing or defending myself, I typed a single message: her baby had died 3 years ago. The group chat fell silent. Then erupted. She insisted her child was almost a year old. The neighbors defended her, accusing me of being cruel, of wishing harm on a child, of being jealous because I couldn't have my own. Their assumptions cut deeper than I expected. Not one of them questioned how I could be shaking a bed when I had lived alone since the day I moved in. Not one of them questioned how she had never once brought the baby outside. But this time, I didn't let their words get to me. I watched as they circled around her like loyal guards, blind to inconsistencies. I remembered how this had ended before, how their misplaced sympathy had turned into blame and action. When she began cursing me again, accusing me of trying to hurt her baby, saying I didn't want her to be happy, something inside me cracked. In my past life, I had tried to soothe her. It hadn't mattered. So now I chose a different path. I sent a voice note telling her to stop harassing me, reminding her again that her child had died long ago. Almost immediately, frantic banging echoed at my door. Through the peephole I saw her, screaming, eyes bloodshot, hair disheveled, accusing me of cursing her child. Neighbors came out to investigate. They glared at me, telling me I was insensitive, cruel, and vulgar. Hearing the same accusations that had once driven me to despair, I felt rage spill over. I opened the door. She charged toward me. I stepped back, ready this time. In the hallway, the argument escalated. We struggled, neighbors pulled us apart, but they blamed me for everything. They said I was picking on a single mother. They said I had woken all their children. They said I needed to apologize. When she slapped me across the face twice, the hallway fell into stunned silence. Lights flickered on automatically. But the neighbors still held me down, telling me to stop making a scene. I demanded proof. I asked why no one had ever seen her baby. Some neighbors hesitated, suddenly remembering that they had never heard crying from her apartment. She quickly insisted the baby was sleeping. She called them foolish for doubting her. She said her child slept soundly because he was exhausted from crying earlier. She twisted every inconsistency into an excuse. Before anyone could respond, the building manager, Mr. Davis, arrived. He suggested checking her apartment for structural noise. She immediately refused. But under the neighbors' pressure, she reluctantly agreed. She asked me if I would move out if her baby was inside. I agreed without hesitation. She dragged me into her apartment. Inside, everything was arranged perfectly for a baby. Formula bottles, diapers, toys, clothes, a baby chair, a crib with wind chimes. It was a picture of motherhood, so carefully crafted, it felt fragile. My conviction wavered for a moment. Had I been mistaken? Had her grief in my past life twisted my memory? She marched to the crib, pulling me close. I leaned over. Empty. She stared into the crib, frozen. Then she fell to the floor, searching everywhere. She opened drawers, shook blankets, looked under furniture. She screamed that her child had been taken. Neighbors exchanged worried glances. They murmured among themselves about never seeing the baby, never hearing him. Still, some tried to comfort her. She refused all reason. She insisted I had stolen him, or the imaginary man I was sleeping with had. Security guards and neighbors began searching the entire complex. Every stairwell, every exit, every corner. No one found a thing. As the search dragged on, she became frantic. When Mr. Davis suggested calling the police, she refused, saying it would frighten her child. When he told her to call her family, she panicked and said her baby wasn't even 1 year old yet, and that she needed more time before telling them. Her answers made no sense. I told them all calmly that her baby wasn't there and probably never had been. A neighbor slapped me. She grabbed me by the arms and begged, screamed, threatened me to reveal where her baby was. I repeated that the baby had died long ago. The police arrived. They reviewed hallway footage. No one had entered or left her apartment. They reviewed building entrance footage. She had never been recorded carrying a baby in or out. Neighbors provided testimony. No one had ever heard a baby. No one had ever seen a stroller. She had never bought supplies from the local store. Everything in her apartment looked unused, arranged like props. When officers asked for a birth certificate, she couldn't provide one. When they asked for hospital records, she said she had forgotten them. When they asked for photos, she claimed she deleted them because they were painful to look at. The lies formed holes too large to cover. The officers requested public records. A nurse who lived in the building overheard and quietly confirmed that there had been no newborn patients with her name at any clinic in the past year. There had never been a baby. When this truth cornered her, she broke completely. She screamed that her child had been alive, that someone had stolen him, that I wanted him dead. Her voice grew shrill, almost animalistic. She tried to claw at the officers. She tried to lunge at me. They restrained her, but she continued thrashing, sobbing, begging for her child. Her cries grew hoarse, echoing painfully, as if she believed her delusion with every piece of her crumbling mind. The paramedics arrived. They sedated her and strapped her onto a stretcher. But as the elevator doors closed, she lifted her head and looked at me. Her eyes were not wild then. They were sharp. Cold. Focused. As if she remembered the other timeline too. As if she remembered killing me. The neighbors apologized afterward. Some were embarrassed. Some avoided eye contact, ashamed of how quickly they had believed her. But the apologies meant little. In my previous life, their sympathy had vanished the moment she accused me. And deep down, I sensed something darker. Because a delusion that detail doesn't come from nowhere. Days later, the police informed me that Jacqueline had a documented history of pregnancy-related trauma. She had suffered a stillbirth 3 years prior and had never received treatment for her grief. She had slowly built a world in which her baby still existed. To maintain that illusion, she needed an enemy. Someone to blame for every noise, every fear, every perceived threat. That person had been me, in both lives. The police recommended I move. I did. I packed my things quietly, unable to shake the feeling that even though she was in psychiatric care, she wasn't truly gone. As I stepped out of the building for the last time, a neighbor approached me with something she had found outside Jacqueline's door. It was a baby rattle. Old, worn, dusty. The kind that hadn't been sold in years. On the handle was a name. Not the name Jacqueline had used in the group chat. But the name of the stillborn child from 3 years ago. A cold shiver ran through me. The air felt heavy. The world suddenly quiet. I realized then that the rebirth I had been given wasn't simply a second chance. It was a warning. Because sometimes the past doesn't just repeat. Sometimes it follows. And sometimes, even when the truth comes out, the hatred that killed you once is still very much alive. After the police took Jacqueline away, everything in the building went unnervingly quiet. The same neighbors who had defended her so fiercely avoided eye contact. Some mumbled apologies in the hallway, as if tossing me a handful of loose coins to pay off a debt they didn't want to acknowledge. Others slipped back into their apartments the moment they saw me, doors shutting a little too quickly. I accepted their apologies with small nods, not because I forgave them, but because I was too tired to carry any more resentment. I had already carried enough for 2 lives. 3 days later, Detective Morgan called me. "We ran deeper checks," he said. "There's no evidence Jacqueline gave birth within the last year. No pediatric records. No vaccinations. Nothing. But there is one record from 3 years ago. A complicated pregnancy. The baby died shortly after birth." My hand tightened around the phone. "So I was right," I murmured. "The baby died." "There was a real loss," he said gently. "But after that, she cut ties with everyone. She never got psychological help. And slowly, she created another version of reality. A baby that survived. A heart condition. A threat she could blame. Me." Silence filled the line for a few seconds. "Victims of trauma sometimes fixate on a person," he continued. "Your independence. Your quiet life." It contrasted with everything she felt she had lost. Her grief had chosen me as its target. Later that night, I began packing my things. The police said I could stay, but I didn't want to. I couldn't sleep in the same space where I had died once and almost died again. I taped shut the last box just as the building group chat pinged. A message from Mr. Davis in bold, formal language stated I had no involvement with any child and that the building regretted doubting me. Apologies followed. Hesitant. Meek. Convenient. I read them all without responding. The next morning, I left my keys at the front desk. Mr. Davis offered a sad smile. "You're always welcome back," he said. I thanked him politely but knew I would never return. I moved into a smaller apartment across town. The building was old but calm. The walls held no memories of past deaths, no echoes of accusations. The neighbors kept to themselves. A woman downstairs baked me a loaf of banana bread. No one mentioned babies or noise complaints. It felt like stepping into a life that wasn't haunted. But some nights, I woke up to imaginary sounds, a faint squeak, like a bed spring under pressure, or a soft cry I had never actually heard. I would sit upright, heart pounding, only to realize the building was silent. It was just the past clinging to the edges of my mind, refusing to let itself be forgotten. 2 weeks later, Detective Morgan called again. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "We've discovered something you should know." I braced myself. "She keeps repeating your name," he said. "In every recounting of events, whether coherent or not, you appear. Sometimes as a neighbor she knew years ago. Sometimes as a nurse. Sometimes just a shadow in the hallway." I closed my eyes. "She talked about her baby dying twice," he continued. "Once in the hospital. Once at home. The psychiatrists believe she's merged memories and fantasies. To her, there were 2 tragedies, 2 deaths, 2 timelines. And both times, you were the one she blamed." A chill ran through me. "She said that?" I whispered. Her exact words were, "He died twice, and she's always the reason." For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Look," he added gently, "you didn't do anything. You were just the person her mind attached the guilt to." "I know," I replied, though the knowledge did little to ease the heaviness in my chest. He encouraged me to consider therapy. I promised to think about it. A few nights later, I dreamt I was back in the old apartment building. The hallway stretched endlessly, lined with identical doors, each labeled 706. In some of them, Jacqueline held an invisible baby. In others, she was alone, rocking an empty blanket. In others still, she lunged at me with a knife. The scenes shifted like slides in a projector, but her eyes were always the same, desperate, angry, hollow. When I woke, I understood that my return to the past hadn't been just about preventing my own death. It had also been about stopping a cycle of grief, madness, and misplaced hatred that would otherwise repeat itself. Jacqueline hadn't just tried to kill me. She had been reliving her baby's death again and again, in versions only she could see. And in every version, she decided I was the culprit. A few days later, the psychiatric hospital called. Dr. Patel, the psychiatrist handling her case, said Jacqueline's condition was complicated. Her mind looped through events with slight variations. Sometimes she was blaming me. Sometimes she blamed herself. Sometimes she blamed the world. In her lucid moments, Dr. Patel said, she claimed she had no choice. That someone needed to be blamed. She says she recognized you the moment she saw you. That you felt familiar. Familiar? I repeated softly. She believes you're the person she failed to confront in her past trauma. Not literally you, but someone you represent. Like a symbol, I said. Exactly. Before hanging up, she added, I know this may not feel like closure, but she's in a safe environment. You are safe. Sometimes, that is the closest thing to an ending these situations allow. I thanked her and ended the call. But a part of me still felt unsettled. Eventually, I decided to return to my old building, not to speak to anyone, but to stand in the hallway one last time. To reclaim something I had lost there. When I arrived, the place looked the same and yet strangely distant. My old door, 705, had a new name on the mailbox. Jacqueline's door, 706, was sealed with an inspection notice. A faint smell of disinfectant hung in the air. I stood between the two doors, the same place where my first life ended and my second life changed course. I touched my old door lightly, letting a quiet breath out. I didn't belong to this place anymore. And it didn't belong to me. As I turned to leave, I noticed a small cardboard box sitting on the floor near 706. Inside were a few objects removed from Jacqueline's apartment, a faded baby rattle, a tiny shoe, and a crumpled ultrasound photo. I picked up the rattle. It was lighter than it should have been, as if time had hollowed it out. When I shook it, it made the faintest sound, almost ghost-like. I placed it back into the box. That grief wasn't mine to carry. On my way out, I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. For the first time, the building no longer felt like a grave I had escaped from, but like a chapter I had finally closed. When I returned to my new neighborhood, 2 children were playing ball in the courtyard. One of them kicked it too hard, and it rolled to my feet. I picked it up and tossed it back. Their laughter filled the air, bright and real. For a second, I thought I heard a faint rattle behind the sound, like a memory brushing against the present, but then it vanished, swallowed by the warmth of the evening light. Back inside my apartment, I sat on my bed and let the silence settle peacefully around me. No squeaking springs. No phantom crying. No echoes of another life. For the first time in a long time, the quiet felt like safety rather than a warning. I didn't know why I had been given a second chance, whether it was luck, fate, or something far stranger. I didn't know whether Jacqueline would ever find peace inside her fractured mind. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. In my first life, the story ended with my death. In my second, it ended with my choice to walk away. And this time, nothing and no one stood in my way.